Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for OWA Week 2023. My name is Dr. Shaima El-Gama and I am coordinator on OWA Week 2023. Please note that this session is being recorded. OWA Week is presented by 4 sponsoring organizations. First, GOA-ON, the Global Ocean Acidification Observing Network. Second, NOAA, the United States National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Third is IAEA, OWA ICC, the International Atomic Energy Agency, Ocean Acidification International Coordination Center. And last but not least, the IOC UNESCO, the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. Next slide, please. GOA-ON was established in 2012 with just a handful of members. Since then, GOA-ON has grown immensely. It now has over 1,000 members from 114 countries. GOA-ON also consists of 9 regional hubs, which span across continents and oceanographic regions. We will hearing from most of them through OWA Week. If you are not a member yet, you can join GOA-ON today by visiting GOA-ON.org. OWA Week debuted in 2020 and returned in 2021 when events and conferences were postponed due to COVID-19. Following the successful in-person symposium on the ocean in a high carbon dioxide world in 2022, GOA-ON is bringing back on OWA Week 2023 to maintain moment around OWA research and provide a virtual platform for the ocean acidification community to exchange their latest findings. We are thrilled to present a wide range of ocean acidification topics and speakers from around the world. During the presentation, all participants are in listen mode. You will welcome to type any question into the question box, which can be found at the bottom of the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. You will be monitoring incoming questions and will be posed through and will pose them to our speakers during the question and answering section, which will begin immediately after the final presentation. For the discussion, you can also use raise hand function in the toolbox at the bottom of your screen, and we will call you to ask your question directly. And with this, I'd like to introduce you to your moderator for the session, Dr. Roshan Ramessur, Associate Professor in Ocean and Coastal Science at the University of Mauritius, currently co-chair Ocean Acidification Africa and the team leader at OIAA, Ocean Acidification Information Exchange for OWA Africa and GOA-ON, Global Ocean Acidification Observing Network. His research interests and publications are in the field of marine biogeochemistry and ocean acidification. He has led OWA project under IOC UNESCO, WIOMSA, the U.S. State Department, the Ocean Fund in Washington, D.C., and NOAA and IAEA or ICC. He has also been lead of ICCZM training under DECOMAP EU and has participated in a number of conferences in Africa, Europe, Asia, and Australia, and North and South America. He has developed an OWA white paper for East Africa with WIOMSA team members. Welcome, Dr. Roshan. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Shama, for the nice introduction. I'll be the moderator for you during this OA Africa session, and we currently have 6 speakers. So without further ado, because the introduction to OA Africa has already been done, we'll start with our first speaker. Carla Edworthy from the South African Institute for Aquatic Biodiversity. And a short bio about Carla. She's an early career researcher from South Africa, currently in the 3rd year of her first postdoctoral position. She's been conducting research in ocean acidification for the last 9 years, focusing on the impacts of OA on the physiology and behavior of coastal fishes. Our current research focuses on establishing an understanding of ocean and coastal acidification along the South African coastline, which is a previously understudied region, as well as experimentally assessing the impacts of future acidification on coastal habitats and species. Thank you, and to you, Carla. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Roshan, for the introduction. And thank you to all of the attendees that have joined us today. It's really nice to be here. So what I'm wanting to present today is some of the progress that we have made with coastal ocean acidification monitoring in South Africa. And for those of you that don't know me, Roshan said, I'm Carla, and I'm a postdoc at the moment at the South African Institute for Aquatic Biodiversity. And I'm currently working on a project that is assessing the global change dynamics across coastal seascapes and the response of different coastal species to global changes. And I have a particular interest in coastal acidification and more recently in microplastics, but unfortunately won't have time to go into all of that today. So I thought I would start off by giving just a quick overview of the South African coastline and just a little bit of background on ocean acidification research in South Africa for any of you that aren't familiar with our work down south. So research on ocean acidification in South Africa has really grown in recent times, and there are now a couple of research groups that are working on this topic in all three of our major bioregions. And our coastline is really complex, and these regions are the subtropical east coast of our country, then the warm temperate south coast, which is where I'm situated, and then the cool temperate west coast. And each of these research groups have quite a different focus for their ocean acidification research, but nonetheless, by now, there's a fair bit of monitoring that's taking place. And of course, that's just really great for our country. So the reason why our coastline is so interesting, and many of you will be familiar with this, but it's because we are situated at the confluence of two major and very different oceans and ocean currents. That being on the west coast, where we have the cool Benguela current that flows in a northward direction up the coast. And then on the east coast, we have the notoriously strong and warm Agulhas current, which flows in a southerly direction through the Indian Ocean region. And the work that I'm presenting today is from this region on the south coast, being the warm temperate region, which falls in mostly Agulhas current influenced area. So the work that I'm going to present today is somewhat of a continuation of the research that I started during my PhD, which was published in this paper back in 2022. And this paper basically describes the carbonate chemistry and pH dynamics in a large coastal bay along our south coast, which is called Algoa Bay. And this bay is an established sentinel site for long-term ecological research. And there's already over a 14-year data set for many physical and biological parameters that are being monitored by this program. But our study that's published in this paper was the first to include pH and carbonate chemistry contributed to this program. So for our study, we monitored pH and associated carbonate chemistry parameters, which included total alkalinity. And we did this using a discrete sampling method, and we used the GOA-ON OA in a box kit, which I'm sure many of you would have heard about by now or heard about this week. And we sampled monthly for the total period of 1 year. And basically the key finding that came out of this research was that there was this one consistently anomalous site in the bay, and it was an inshore site that showed really different pH conditions compared to any other sites in the bay. And that is the site that I'm showing with the green arrow. And at this site, pH was consistently higher than at any other site in the bay, reaching average pH levels of around 8.3 pH units during the daytime. So what makes this site different to any others in our bay is that it has this established macroalgal reef, which you can see in the picture here. And we suspected that this was the driver of these higher average pH levels at the site. And this prompted us to explore this particular site a little bit further, and that we did for a number of reasons, which will become apparent as I continue with my talk. So to build on our work, we decided that we wanted to continue monitoring this macroalgal reef site to better understand the processes and drivers of the anomalous pH conditions there. So the other thing we'd like to do in future is also compare this to other vegetated sites, and I'll show you those plans a little bit later. But this macroalgal site situated in the bay is dominated by a red algal species called Placamium coral horizon. You can see it in the pictures here. And this macroalgae forms complex reef structures that are utilized by many coastal species, from invertebrates to fish. So we wanted to monitor pH variability continuously at this site to really fully comprehend the fine-scale temporal pH variability. So to do this, we used two types of autonomous sensors that use two different methods to measure pH. You can see them in the pictures in the box. On the right-hand side of the box, we have the iSAMI pH sensor, which I received as part of the GOA-ON OA in a box kit, which uses spectrophotometric methods to measure pH, and then the electrode method, which is used by a hobo logger, and we procured some of these. So in these pictures, I thought I would just show you how we went about deploying our sensors. The deployment was for the most part just to test our loggers, not really to answer any specific research questions yet. And we wanted to see if both the loggers provided us with reasonable and comparable data. So we basically attached them to a large stainless steel cage, which you can see in the right-hand image, and then attached the cage to two really heavy steel railways. And that was to keep the loggers in place underwater, and also to ensure that the sensors were suspended above the sediment. Because our coastline is really exposed and dynamic with high wave action, we really needed to add a lot of weight to keep our sensors in place. And we added a small danger sign just to hopefully deter any thieves, which is another problem we face. And also, I just thought I would show how we had quite a bit of biofouling on our sensors, even though these were only deployed for 30 days, as you can see in the middle picture. But fortunately, the hobo loggers come with a copper guard that attaches to the sensor, which prevents biofouling on the actual sensor tip. And that seemed to work fairly well. But 30 days seemed to be almost the limit for these loggers. So here I'm just showing some preliminary data from this deployment. We haven't processed or analyzed it at all yet, so it's just raw data. But both of these loggers were, like I said, deployed for 30 days. On the top graph, you can see the data produced by the iSAMI sensor, which stopped logging a little bit earlier than the hobo sensor, which is shown below that graph. Also, the iSAMI sensor was set to record pH every hour, whereas the hobo logger could record pH every 15 minutes. So it provided slightly higher resolution data. We were just generally really happy to see that the data appears to be comparable between the two sensors. And it seemed that the hobo loggers are recording reasonable pH values, which is what we were kind of looking for. Although the hobo loggers did record a slightly lower average pH, some differences are expected between the sensors, and we are hoping that we can somehow compensate for that difference mathematically, if we can figure out how to do that. But what was most important for us to identify here was that the hobo loggers are able to capture variability at these vegetated sites at a scale and resolution that is relevant for our needs. And what was also really interesting, just as a side note, is that we seem to have detected two potential upwelling events during our month-long deployment, which you can see by these drops in temperature in the plots. And this is something we would really like to explore further. But in general, the preliminary data gave us a good idea of what's happening at the vegetated sites on a finer temporal scale, and how pH variability at the site might be driven by biological activity associated with the macroalgae there. So then, considering that seagrass habitats have similar nursery functions to macroalgae, for coastal species, particularly those species that we are interested in. We wanted to conduct similar pH monitoring in these seagrass habitats and compare those findings to our reef site. So what we did is develop these little moorings for the hobo loggers, and then we deployed them in different densities of seagrass in the lower reaches of a marine-dominated estuary. And although I do not have these results ready to present today, we suspect to see similar variability in pH conditions in our seagrass habitats. And then I'd just like to highlight the importance and the relevance of this research in a bit of a broader context. In South Africa, and like in many other coastal areas, vegetated habitats are known to be important nursery habitats for coastal species, and especially for fishes, which is what we do most of our research on. So similarly, these habitats have been identified to serve as potential refugia from ocean acidification for coastal species because they tend to raise the average pH of the surrounding seawater, especially during photosynthetic periods. So here I just show 2 review papers recently published by our research group that highlights these important functions of vegetated habitats as nurseries and refugia, and hopefully our future work will continue monitoring these and build on our understanding of these functions. So just to wrap up today, I thought I would just highlight some of our future ideas for future research. As mentioned, our group is interested both in monitoring and biological research. So in terms of monitoring, once we have fine-tuned our instruments, we hope to expand our monitoring to other habitats that are used by fishes and coastal species, things like artificial canals, beaches, and other parts of the estuary and coastal zone. And then in terms of biology, we really hope to better our understanding of the role of these vegetated habitats as refugia, and to also assess whether these higher pH values and higher pH variability in these habitats contribute to adaptation of coastal species to future conditions. So thank you so much for listening, and I'm really looking forward to the rest of the talks and some discussion.
Great. Thank you very much, Carla, for your very nice presentation. So I'll probably move to our next speaker. I'll just give you a brief introduction of our next speaker. And obviously, our session is to look at the effects of climate change on the ocean and coastal systems in Africa. And the major cause is the increasing rate of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and will affect physical and biological characteristics of ocean and coastal systems. So during our session, we'll be happy to present to our speakers presenting their research work and discuss adaptation measures. So without further ado, I'll move on to our next speaker, Salih Ella Eldin from the National Institute of Oceanography and Fisheries in Egypt. Salah Eldin Mustafa El Shalkami is an associate professor at the National Institute of Oceanography and Fisheries in Egypt, with a strong commitment to addressing the challenges of climate change. With a background in biology and extensive expertise in environmental science, her career has been dedicated to understanding and mitigating the impact of climate change on aquatic systems. Now, up to you, Sally. Thank you very much.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Roshan, for the presentation. This is Dr. Sally Salah from the National Institute of Oceanography and Fisheries. And today I will discuss the pressing issue of emerging pollutants in our ocean, focusing on the dual challenge of ocean acidification and microplastics. We all know that human activity are dramatically affected the ocean ecosystem, especially in the function and the ecological services that the ocean provides. The impact of pollutants to the environment is a global concern since the contaminants exhibit persistence, wide distribution, and accumulation in both organisms and environment. Emerging pollutants are substances that have gained attention due to their environmental impact. These pollutants pose a growing threat to marine ecosystem and demand our immediate attention. Basically, plastic pollution and the climate change are two major global threats, although the influences of climate change on the microplastic formation and distribution is not fully understood. Climate drivers such as ocean warming and the ocean deoxygenation and acidification is emerging pollutants. It's well known that the anthropogenic activity associated with increasing carbon dioxide emission, which have a devastating effect on the marine environment. Here we can say that the ocean absorbs about the third human-induced carbon dioxide, causing the change in seawater chemistry leading to ocean acidification, which represents a serious threat to marine life ecosystem and humans who depends on the ocean. When the carbon dioxide dissolves in seawater, it forms a carbon oxide, releasing hydrogen ion, which increase the acidity of the ocean. Here we can say the fluctuations or maybe the mean oceanic pH through time from 1985 to 2020. Since the first manufacture of plastic in the 2nd century, plastic products and application have been globally popular and included almost all sectors of our daily life. Over 370 million tons of plastic are produced each year for the use worldwide. At least 14 million tons of plastic end up in the ocean every year, and the plastic makes up 80% of all marine debris from surface water to the deep sea. Since the first production of plastic in 1950, more than 9,002,000 tons have been accumulating in the environment, while only 50%, more than 50% are discarded in the environment. Well, the first evidence of plastic debris in marine environment was officially reported in 1972. Later, scientists recorded plastic in different water bodies. Plastic waste is entering marine environment regularly through fresh water, and more than 70% of plastic waste is transported by rivers, which ends up in the ocean, causing extensive plastic pollution. Plastic debris can be found in aquatic ecosystem in different sizes, starting from macro size to nanoparticles. And today we will talk about the micro particle size, which is less than 5 millimeters. Here we can say different forms and different types of microplastic that have been detected in the marine environment. There is two types of marine microplastics. This is a there are primary microplastic and secondary microplastics. Primary microplastic, that's type of microplastic that enter the environment as its final shape in micro size. While secondary microplastic is that large plastic particles get into the ocean and then start to fraction into smaller fractions. The fragmentation of plastic debris is occurring according to the presence of wave and sunlight, salinity, pH, and moisture. These all factors start to degrade the plastic particles or large plastic particles into fine plastic particles. Here we can say that a new study has been revealing that plastic degradation, which also known as plastic aging, contribute to the ocean acidification due to the release of dissolved organic carbon compound and carbon dioxide from plastic particle itself and their additives, which acidify the aquatic environment. This study also have been to prove that in highly plastic polluted ocean, plastic degradation will lead to decline in pH levels down to 5, which is comparable to the worst case scenario for pH drop induced by continuous anthropogenic emission of carbon dioxide through the 21st century. Both microplastic and ocean acidification has a synergic relation, since the degradation of microplastic is directly related to water pH. Lower pH has increased the microplastic formation, while the formation released more dissolved organic carbon compound and carbon dioxide, which lowers the water pH even more. Since the degradation of plastic has been suggested to be a major source of dissolved carbon, organic carbon, so it may has potentially impact the oceanic carbon cycle and the community dynamics of planktons. As aging of plastic also enhanced the aerobic degradation of plastic, this generates even more carbon dioxide and making the situation even worse. Over time, microplastic undergoes aging by developed surface fraction and cracks. These changes create more favorite ecology for the microorganisms and attach forming colonies and biofilm. In aquatic environment, the surface of plastic film accumulate a large number of microbial communities such as bacteria and algae, along with several toxins. These biofilm on the surface of microplastic creating a complex and dynamic microenvironment for microorganisms. These biofilm can alter the chemical and the biological properties of microplastics, potentially affecting their environment persistence and transfer of pollutants, and even interaction with the marine life. The pH factor is critical for surviving and the activity of microorganisms, which is crucial influence the microbial population and degradation. Here we can say that once the biofilm is formed, the bacteria began to resist more, and they have been resisting high fluctuation in pH, which increased their resistance. On the other hand, the biofilm-coated microplastic can also release chemical signals into water, which encourage their ingestion by organisms. This may have been the potential to increase the uptake and the biomagnification of pollutants along with the food chain. Pharmaceuticals also another class of the emerging pollutants in aquatic ecosystem. On the left, we can say that the acidic condition, the absorption of some pharmaceuticals such as antibiotics, tetracycline, was higher than in alkaline condition. On the other hand, researcher has shown that this dissolved organic matter can also reduce the absorption of certain pharmaceuticals on the microplastics, likely due to competition between the dissolved organic matter and other organic pollutants for absorption site on the microplastics. Another critical issue here is the antibiotic resistance propagation. The coexistence of potentially pathogenic bacteria, microplastic biofilm, and antibiotic or pharmaceutical residues can create conditions that to exchange of microplastic resistance genes with the biofilm. This gene transfer can contribute to the development of the spread of antibiotic resistant bacteria in the aquatic ecosystem. This phenomenon known to pose a significant global health risk as it reduces the efficacy of antibiotic, leading to difficulties in treating bacteria infection. Also, microplastic surface are sensitive to pH changes. The surface change of microplastic record higher negative charge in acidic environmental, while recorded positive charge in strong acidic environment. This charge can influence the absorption of ion and organic molecule and the biofilm formation of the microplastic surface. So it's really hard to predict the behavior of or the interaction of microplastic with other pollutants in a variant pH environment. Pollutants also could be absorbed to the surface of the microplastics through different types of chemical bonds and interactions, such as the physical, the chemical absorption, the hydrogen bonds, and many other types of bonds. While trace elements are one of the most abundant pollutants in the aquatic environment, microplastic can absorb trace elements through different ways. However, pH can alter the capacity of microplastic to absorb certain metals. For example, it was found that the absorption of cadmium, lead, and cobalt, and even nickel on both aged and virgin microplastic decreases with decreasing the water pH, while absorption of chromium have been increased with decreasing the pH. As we mentioned before, in pH less than 3, microplastic become positively charged. This lowers the theta potential and the electrostatic repulsion, while when pH is slightly increased, the microplastic became more negatively charged, altering the absorption capacity to negatively charged pollutants such as metals. So the behavior and the interaction of pollutants may vary significantly with decline in the pH of the surrounding environment. Ocean acidification could aggravate the toxicological impacts of predominant pollutants. It could increase the toxicity of microplastic and the risk of infectious disease in marine organisms. Increase the propagation of the antibiotic-resistant bacteria, increasing the alarm, reducing the efficacy of many antibiotic, and hinders the bacterial infection treatment. Possible solution for the dual challenge of ocean acidification and the microplastic is crucial. So reducing carbon dioxide emission is a fundamental issue in mitigation of these challenges. Also, plastic waste reduction, especially single-use plastic, could help. Recycling and plastic collection technologies can help in reducing plastic waste, as finding eco-friendly alternative can reduce the need for traditional kind of plastic. Yet, more international cooperation along with research and innovation are needed to solve this issue. Thank you all for listening and for taking questions.
Thank you very much, Sally, for your very interesting talk about acidification and microplastics and plastics in general. As you can see, our session is still ongoing with to understand how ocean acidification can affect the physical and biological characteristics of oceans and coastal systems, especially modifying the ecosystem structure and functioning. And obviously, there will be an impact on ocean coastal economic activities, which may include marine biodiversity loss, fisheries, and shorelines losses. So without further ado, I'll move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Anthony Akpan, who is the president of the Pan-African Vision for the Environmental, PAVE, Lagos, Nigeria. Founder, President, Pan-African Vision for the Environment, Nigeria. He is a human development and public policy specialist with a degree in applied chemistry from the University of Uyo, Nigeria, and postgraduate studies diploma in water management, with a specialization in water sciences management, UNESCO IOG, Netherlands. With over 20 years sector experience in human ecology and sustainable development issues, spanning NGO management, government, civil society, private sector, and international development agencies relations. Other areas of expertise include fundraising, policy analysis, participatory research, advocacy, capacity building, project development and implementation, monitoring and evaluation, consultancy, public sector advisory, grassroots mobilization, coalition building, and stakeholder engagement. So I move to you, Anthony. Thank you.
Yeah, Anthony, I think maybe we'll move to the next person.
Still bad, very bad.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll move to the next person just while you troubleshoot your sound and come back to you at the end. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Falilu Adekambi from the University of Lagos, Nigerian Institute for Oceanography and Marine Research. Falilu's PhD project is premised on the synthesis of data to characterize the dynamics of seasonal coastal ocean carbonate system ocean acidification off the coast of Nigeria, Gulf of Guinea. He is currently a PhD candidate at the University of Lagos, Nigeria in the Department of Marine Sciences, and until date, Falilu is a researcher at the Nigerian Institute for Oceanography and Marine Research, NIOMR, where he conducts studies on Nigerian marine and coastal systems in the Chemical and Physical Oceanography Department. Falilu is also a member of our steering committee for OA Africa. Thank you very much. Move to Falilu now. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Roshan, for the introduction. I'm quite glad to be here to present my work. So, thank you. So, I welcome you once again to my presentation on monitoring the seawater carbonated chemistry system of Lagos. Next slide. There has been a plummeting trend in the global surface ocean pH since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, which we can see that this is it's very apparent that there's a decline, and there's a concurrent decline also in the saturation state with respect to calcium carbonate, that is the mineral omega calcite and omega aragonite. We see that there's a projection that this decline would continue until the end of the 21st century. This is under the scenario that there's emission of CO2, so which we hope that we can arrest. So this decline in pH and the calcium carbonate saturation states, it's what culminates and which we all commonly known as ocean acidification. Next slide, please. Now, ocean acidification in the open ocean is mainly driven by the uptake of anthropogenic CO2. But in coastal environments, together with the uptake of anthropogenic CO2, there are a number of factors which causes acidification. One of these factors is the input of high dissolving organic carbon waters that is being discharged into the adjoining coastal environment from rivers and estuarine water bodies. Now, this would increase the level of dissolving organic carbon and, for example, even organic matter or materials that are discharged into the open coastal environments. Now, this results into respiration in subsurface waters, which would result into hypoxic condition, as well as increase in dissolve in CO2, which will drive down the pH, resulting to acidification. Also, eutrophication due to input of nutrients into the adjoining water bodies also could result into acidification in coastal environment. And then again, the primary productivity, which is enhanced by nutrient loading, can also result to this, coupled with the influx of high anthropogenic CO2 water from the open sea. So these are factors. Next slide. So in coastal environment where there's upwelling, now this system are also vulnerable to acidification. For instance, up in the eastern boundary upwelling system, you have bottom water, which is rich in dissolving organic carbon, are being transported to the surface, and also lower pH waters together with water that is low in calcium carbonate saturation state. So all this come to the surface and then impacts on, most importantly, calcifying organisms which require calcium carbonate minerals for building their shells. For example, algae, for example, coccolithophores and the likes of even corals and the like. So when all this happens, this upwelling could exacerbate the acidification condition in the coastal environment. Next slide, please. So these our studies, is the rationale behind our studies basically due to the depth in the knowledge on the seasonal dynamics of carbonate chemistry in coastal waters in the Gulf of Guinea. So, and the next slide, the objective of our study is basically to quantify the seasonal variability in seawater saturation state with respect to calcium carbonate and pH of the coast of Lagos, and also to investigate the relationship between the parameters of the CO2 system in this environment. So our studies was carried out, next slide, was carried out off the coast of Lagos. Oh, sorry, the oceanographic setting in the Gulf of Guinea, basically the ocean circulation system in the Gulf of Guinea is governed by the year-round Guinea current, which happens all year round. Now, in the Gulf of Guinea, there is two categories of upwelling. We have the coastal upwelling and the equatorial upwelling. But most importantly, because of the importance of coastal system for fisheries production, we will talk about the minor upwelling which occurs in the coastal Gulf of Guinea. Now, the minor upwelling occurs between December and March, while the major upwelling occurs in boreal summer between July and September. Now, we see that during this upwelling, like I said earlier on, we have an increase in DIC, which comes to the surface due to low PM, due to high level of CO2 in bottom waters. And again, during this time, we have the negative, the sea surface temperature anomaly, which is usually very, very low, which you can see obviously. And then again, there's an enhancement of the primary production during this period. Next slide. So our study was conducted off the coast of Lagos in the Gulf of Guinea, where the tidal cycle is semi-diurnal, and the local climate is basically characterized by a dry and wet season. Now, the variability in the seasonal variability in this area is influenced by a complex interaction of the currents and the discharge which comes from the adjoining lagoon, which is a very important lagoon in West Africa, the Lagos Lagoon, as well as precipitation which occurs there, and then of course tidal mixing. Next slide. So we conducted our sampling in 3 stations off the coast of Lagos from 6 nautical miles to about 18 nautical miles, where we collected our seawater samples at 5 meters. And during December 2018 to April 2021, during our cruise, we collected in situ measurement for sea surface temperature, sea surface salinity, and we collected seawater samples for nutrients, dissolving organic carbon, and total alkalinity. Next slide. So for the environmental variables that were measured, we measured dissolving organic carbon and total alkalinity using the Vinta 3D system, where we now use the values of the DIC and total alkalinity into the CO2 system to calculate pH in total scale and the omega calcite and omega aragonite. We use the first and second dissociation constant for carbonic acid as presented by Dixon and Milero for our calculation. And the nutrient analysis which we carried out was spectrophotometrically measured. We measured silicate, and nitrate. Now, findings for our study. Next slide. Next slide. So we see that the seasonal variability in temperature, the temperature varied between 22 and 32 degrees between dry and wet season. And we see that the variability in the wet season is quite more than in the dry season. Now, this is so because in the tropics, there's a longer photo period at the time of insolation, you know. So during the dry season, the temperature is almost not during the day is almost not quite different. So, but during the wet season, you can have, it's a longer wet season in the area here in Lagos. So you can have some period where you have higher temperatures, while some other days you have rain and precipitation, which drops the temperature. So this is the reason why we have a higher variability in the wet season. Likewise, in the salinity, we see that the salinity range between 28 and 36 degrees, and we see that there's a slight increase in salinity in the wet season compared to the dry season, which ordinarily we would expect that the reverse should be the case. That shows that the processes which perhaps govern the salinity variability here goes just beyond maybe precipitation alone, which you would expect that during the rainy season, the salinity should be lower. So it means that the factors which contribute to salinity variability could extend beyond precipitation, perhaps maybe circulation. But this, we didn't carry out that detailed probing for this study, but we see that there's a slight increase in salinity in the wet season. Next slide. So the variability in pH, we see that there's a considerable variability in pH between 7.72 to 8.07. And we see that the low pH, the lowest pH value correspond to the aragonite saturation, the omega aragonite saturation, which is close to unity. Now, we know that omega saturation state for calcium carbonate, when we have it above 1, then it means that the seawater it helps organisms to make their shells. But when the omega saturation state is less than 1, then this can cause dissolution of organisms in creating and forming their shells. So we see that in both seasons, the saturation state was quite higher than 1, so it's super saturated. Next slide. So for the relationship between pH and omega aragonite and calcite, we see that there's a strong relationship, especially between pH and omega aragonite, and a much between pH and even omega calcite. So what this depicts is that this environment is there's a strong interaction between these two variables, which means that the impact of acidification could arise if there is a tilting of any of these variables because of the strength of their correlation. Next slide. But there we see that for pH and the dissolved inorganic carbon and total alkalinity, we see a negative correlation. This, first of all, indicates that the water is well buffered. The seawater in the environment is buffered, which can assist in the calcifying organism to make their shells. But at the same time, we see that the DIC can also result to, if there's no, it can also result to acidification. So this indicates that there might be a vulnerability of the ecosystem to future changes, such as acidification in future. Next slide. Then for total alkalinity and dissolving organic carbon, there's also a direct correlation. This also indicates that these two variables are the processes that are govern their variability, and as there's a covariation, which means that the processes which govern their variability are virtually the same. Likewise for total alkalinity and salinity, there's a direct correlation because the factors which govern salinity and alkalinity variation is also strongly connected with total alkalinity variation. Next slide. So on a conclusive note, The supersaturated waters with corresponding pH range, which we document in this study, might already negatively impact the calcification of some organisms. And then again, the correlation between total alkalinity, salinity, and dissolving organic carbon indicates that there's a complex interaction of biogeochemical processes that affect the carbon system and which also affect the marine ecosystem. Now, the future ocean acidification will first temporarily result to an undersaturated seawater with respect to aragonite, and then might result to a dissolution problem in as time goes on. And this is this calls for the fact that there has to be continuous observation on different time scales, maybe on much shorter time scales than seasonal time scales, to be able to understand the dynamics of the carbonate system of the coast of Lagos. Next slide. So I would like to acknowledge the following institutions for the role they have played in the actualization of this project. I will acknowledge University of Lagos, the Nigerian Institute for Oceanography and Marine Research, and the Institute for Environmental Science and Technology at UAB, ICTA, Barcelona, and the Spanish Institute for Oceanography, in Galicia, in Spain, the Nigerian Institute for the Nigerian Maritime Safety Agency for providing ship time to go to sea to samples. And then finally, I would also appreciate the Ocean Foundation for giving us the fund which we have used to accomplish the different stages of this project. And then finally, the GOA-ON for giving us the platform to showcase what we are doing. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Falu, for this very interesting study in carbonate chemistry of the coast of Guinea. And obviously, these are very important studies for Africa. And we'll probably, our next speaker now will talk about Mauritius on the east coast of Africa, a small island. So without further ado, an introduction which I will make. Yadav is currently enrolled as an MPhil PhD student of Chemical Oceanography of the Faculty of Science, University of Mauritius. He completed his degree in chemistry at the same institution in 2019. Current research is centered around the chemical aspects of ocean acidification in the coastal lagoons of Mauritius. More precisely, he's interested in the various processes which affect the natural variability of carbonate parameters and dissolved oxygen in seawater. He recently published a peer-reviewed article comparing total pH, total alkalinity, and DO content from monitoring efforts between 5 different coastal sites around Mauritius. And building upon his work, his current objective is now to quantify these processes using satellite observations, scattered field observations, and models of evolution. And now to you, Yadav, Abish, and Wood. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for this introduction. It is a pleasure for me to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to present my research. So like you said in the introduction, I'm an MPhil PhD student at the University of Mauritius, and my research is actually on the ocean acidification monitoring efforts and comparisons in Mauritius, a small island developing state in the southwestern Indian Ocean. So the contents of this presentation, we will first go about a brief background on ocean acidification, the OA monitoring effects in Mauritius, the statistical comparisons that have been performed in this study, and the conclusions. So just a brief overview on ocean acidification. Like we know, due to the increased releases of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the oceans which function as carbon sinks through the marine carbonate chemistry are now prone to ocean acidification. This process starts by the increased absorption of atmospheric carbon dioxide through the sea-air barrier, causing dissolved CO2 molecules to react with seawater, forming carbonic acid. Now, carbonic acid dissociates to form bicarbonate and carbonate ions, and in doing so, hydrogen ions are also released which protonate the seawater and affects the acidity. So in this study, we are using the pH to monitor the acidity, or more accurately, the pH on the total hydrogen ion scale. Several other carbonate parameters can be calculated to measure ocean acidification. In this research, we are focused on the pH and the total alkalinity, which is given here by Dixon's definition of total alkalinity. So just a brief overview on Mauritius. It is found in the Indian Ocean to the east of Africa. It is a small island developing state, and it is vulnerable to the impacts of ocean acidification, both socio-economically and ecologically. Ocean acidification monitoring efforts in Mauritius began in 2016 at Flic-en-Flac, which you can see in the picture on the left-hand side. So at Flic-en-Flac, the pH and total alkalinity, as well as the sea surface temperature and the sea surface salinity have been measured. And now in this research, along with these parameters, we have also recently started measuring the dissolved oxygen content, and we have also expanded to 4 other sites, resulting in a current total of 5 sites. So for these measurements, we are using the UV visible spectrophotometry for pH determination, and we are using the open cell potentiometric titration for total alkalinity. For dissolved oxygen, we are using the Winkler titration. Just a brief overview about the site characteristics. So first, the sampling cycle that we have adopted was that each cycle starts with Flic-en-Flac in the west and ends with Lacambus in the southeast. And this cycle was repeated throughout the duration of the study. At each site, data was collected at a frequency of 30 minutes, and this was repeated twice per month for each site. These sites were chosen for their specific characteristics. So for example, at Flic-en-Flac, it is a coastal site with a small opening in the reef. Albion is an open sea site, and in fact, Albion also receives direct oceanic waters to the shoreline. Montchoisy consists of seagrass meadows. It is well protected by reefs, and it is a very calm lagoon. And Trudodus in the east is a coastal site with a small opening in the reef, similar to Flic-en-Flac in the west. Lacambus, in fact, for us, it is a very interesting coastal site because it has a very, very wide opening in the reef. And this wide opening in the reef actually makes Lacambus receive direct oceanic currents from the Indian Ocean. So OA monitoring efforts in Mauritius. So what we are doing is that we are building a baseline data of these parameters. Since there's virtually no marine carbonate data available for Mauritius, this research is going to serve as a baseline for future studies. Moreover, some future work will also be included, which will consist of the calculation of other carbonate parameters such as DIC, the dissolved inorganic carbon, the saturation state of calcium carbonate, and the rebel factors using the pH and total alkalinity data that we are gathering right now. So the observations of this study are to investigate how these parameters are changing with time. We can also find out the differences in these parameters between the 5 sites of study that we have mentioned before. And we can also deduce the interseasonal change from summer to winter in these parameters. So the temporal variations for each site and each parameter are shown in this diagram. So on the horizontal axis, you can find the duration of this study. It started from July 2021 for all the parameters and ended in June 2022. On the left-hand side, on the horizontal axis, you can see the parameters that we have investigated. So the duration, again, is from July 2021 to June 2022. It covers the winter season, which is from May to September in Mauritius, and the summer season, which is from October to April. So for the sea surface temperature, We observe a wide amplitude between the minimum and maximum values, and the wide amplitude is actually at around 11 degrees Celsius. For pH, we observe a high pH value at Lacambus in December 2021. It was in the summer season, and the lowest value that we observed was at Montchoisy in June 2022 in winter. So again, the pH is characterized by a wide amplitude. For total alkalinity, it is also characterized by a wide amplitude of around 473 micromoles per kilogram. And again, for dissolved oxygen, we also found a wide and appreciable amplitude, in fact, at 4.84 milligrams per liter. So all of these information mean that there is high temporal variations in these parameters at these 5 coastal sites. We then move on to the spatial comparisons. So that is the differences between the 5 sites in terms of their seasonal extremity. So in this box plot, we can see that the warmest waters are at Trou-de-Douce, while the coldest waters are at Montchoisy. For the pH, we obtain the highest average summer values at Lacambus, while Trou-de-Douce had the lowest winter averages. In terms of total alkalinity, the lowest summer average was obtained at Flic-en-Flac, and interestingly, that Flic-en-Flac also contained the highest mean during the winter. And we also notice that total alkalinity is usually lower in summer than in winter. For dissolved oxygen, there is not much interseasonal change. However, we can see in this picture that Montchoisy is distinct from the other sites. It is actually much higher than the 4 other sites. For the seasonal change between summer and winter, significant changes are obtained at all 5 sites except at Montchoisy. This hints towards the possible impact of the seagrass meadows that I mentioned before. So, and for alkalinity, although slightly higher averages are obtained in winter compared to summer, the statistical analysis mostly reveal no major differences between the interseasonal change. For dissolved oxygen, only Flic-en-Flac and Lacambus showed significant differences due to the interseasonal change. So to conclude, the results confirm that there is significant seasonal variation in pH and dissolved oxygen between summer and winter, but none for total alkalinity. In summer, the mean pH is higher than in winter. And this is due to the higher sea surface temperature in summer, leading to increases in the average kinetic energy of carbon dioxide, which allows these molecules to outgas from the sea air barrier into the atmosphere. Now, this causes the concentration of CO2 to decrease, hence resulting in the higher pH values in summer that we have been observing. Moreover, the potential of the seagrass meadows at Montchoisy in terms of ocean acidification mitigation and refuge is evident. And we are currently in the process of studying the impacts of the seagrass at Montchoisy for this research. It can also be deduced that the waters at the 5 studied sites are not hypoxic, since the mean dissolved oxygen values at all sites in both seasons are well above the threshold level. So this was it for my presentation. I thank you very much for your attention, and I wish to thank the IOC UNESCO Wayonsa, the GOA-ON for this very good opportunity to present this research, the Higher Education Commission of Mauritius, my 2 supervisors, Associate Professor Ramessur and Associate Professor Boudou, and the University of Mauritius. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Yadav, for your very brilliant talk. Just to mention that you will be off to Chile, funded by the UNESCO, to attend the workshop in, what's the place called?
La Serena. initially.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah, no, you're off in 2 weeks' time, so it's a very nice presentation.
thank you.
So, yeah, without further ado, I'll move out to, we have still 2 speakers, but still we'll keep Anthony at the end, but we have Zachary here to make a short introduction. Zachary So from l'Institut de recherche halieutique et océanologique du Bénin, Centre national de données océanographiques du Centre béninois de la recherche scientifique et de l'innovation. Fisherman biologist, oceanographer, director of Institute de recherche halieutique et océanologique du Bénin, and the responsibility of Center for Scientific Research and Innovation. He's professor and researcher of the Zoology Department of FAST, FAST, UAC, Aboni, Calawi University, Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research, chairman of a working group on demersal fish stock assessments in the South Atlantic Zones, SICAF FAO. Member of the Ad Hoc Committee on Science and Technology of Abidjan Convention, focal point of the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, IOC UNESCO, and IODE National Focal Point and Vice Chair of IOC Africa. À toi, Zachary. Thank you.
Thank you for my detail. I just I show you the outline of my presentation. First, I'm going to a short introduction, and second, CO2 and ocean chemistry, impact of acidification, and mitigation and conclusion. Now that ocean acidification is a decrease in pH due to absorption of CO2 from the atmosphere. This CO2 comes from the human activity mainly. Since the Industrial Revolution, the concentration of carbon dioxide, CO2, in the atmosphere has increased due to the burning of fossil fuel and land use change. The ocean absorbs about 30% of the CO2 that is released in the atmosphere. And as the level of atmospheric CO2 increases, so do to the level of the ocean. When CO2 is absorbed by seawater, a series of chemical reactions occur, resulting in the increasing concentration of hydrogen ion. This increase cause the seawater to become more acid and cause carbonate ion to be relatively less abundant. Carbonate ions are important building block of structures such as sea, shell, and coral skeleton. Decrease in the carbonate ion can be made building and maintaining shell and other calcium carbonate structure difficult for calcifying organisms such as oyster, clam, sea ocean, shallow water coral, deep sea coral, and calcareous plankton. This change in ocean chemistry can affect the behavior of emulsification organisms as well. Certain fish ability to detect predator is decreased in more acid water. When these organisms are at the risk, the entire web may also be at risk. Ocean acidification is affecting the entire world ocean, including coastal, estuarine, and waterway. Many economies are dependent on the fish and shellfish, and people worldwide rely on food from the ocean as their primary source of protein. Now we have here how is the process is going. You see CO2 for the greenhouse gas and atmosphere is counted to about the 140 and 1.4 and approaching emission. That is just a schematic. I show the acidification on this also. You see the fishermen expecting in have also consuming the price with this. Also, you see some species here has a impact on this acidification. And you see here we have acidification CO2 is just to show how the process is going, like in chemistry, process. Carbonate ion, you see carbonate is going to bicarbonate, and free ion is going to join to have, we have H2CO3, an abundant healthy coral, mollusks, and other marine calcium. We see the pH water in here, how is the decrease in this project in the projection, for example. Now we have timeline of climate, what how is going, you see it here, and how it's going to increase from 96 to 2021. This is, you see here on the map, how is the signature in 195, and ratification, how is a nation in the world, they are saying agreement to respect the emission of gas. We have also the last one, the Paris Agreement, for example. You see how many people, how many countries sign this agreement. A ratification to most of the people, most of the countries never ratified nor sign. You see a few countries do this one. Now we are going to the impact of acidification. Impact of acidification, we have here. We have two. Well, we have for the side, for my left side, we have high carbon emission, for example, impact on the environment, on seawater and the water and on the resources. And the right side, you see, reduce the carbon emission. In this case, we see we have better life here. Life growing, we have some trees or mangrove and so on. We have it here. And you see also the second observation of the phenomenon, how it works. We see here the ocean absorbs CO2, the ocean absorbs CO2 break, and you see this two part, how is more. Well, when we don't have acidification, a lot of acidification, what we have is it. So now with biological, we have biological process, for example, increase of acidity combined with other environment parameter like pollution and temperature has a potential impact on biological process. On larva development, egg hatching, building shell, and maintaining metabolism, boosting photosynthesis, obtain essential mineral nutrient, for example. And now on larva development, you see you have global warming and ocean acidification affect fertilization and earlier development of the sea ocean, for example. You see it here, life in the species Paracentus lividus. And ocean acidification results of determined development affect called larva, for example, you see the larva here. And egg hatching, you see here, earlier arrested development of the egg here. And we have fully development here. You have a hatch here, and fully development, you see that a lot of part of the egg is not developed very, very well. The global warming and ocean acidification affect fertilization and earlier development of sea ocean. For example, you see this how the egg is developed, and built-in shell, for example, how acidification affects shell organisms. Explore how carbon dioxide in the air is mixing into the ocean and making it harder for some shelled organisms to build their shell. Carbon dioxide from boring fossil to change in the chemistry of the ocean excess CO2 means the ocean is become more acid and faster. And this may threat with several of marine life. To maintain metabolism, for example, you see ecosystem metabolism drive pH variability and modulate long-term acidification. Many physical processes operate with a narrow pH range. Outside of the range, biochemical reaction may be slow or inefficient to keep the organism healthy. Species can adjust to change their surround by activity, maintaining a constant internal environment. This maintenance requires significant expenditure of energy. You see here how the current, for example, ocean acidification, how it's coming, because implication, reduction on population structure, for example. You see, here too we have yes, we train is going how is going with trend. How the trend is going from 90 to is the prediction from 2081, and decrease reflects in sense of direction. For example, is a response of marine organisms to increase acidification. We have maintained metabolism also ocean acidification includes the accumulation of toxic phenotype compound across trophic level, altered metabolism pathway on user of ocean acidification process. Chemical processor is produced like this here. The boosting photosynthesis, ocean acidification, warming, and desoxygenation associated with increased atmospheric CO2 rise and shoaling of the upper mixed layer to the warming exposed organism downwelling there to higher level of solar acidification. Carbon dioxide can stimulate plant growing by boosting the rate of photosynthesis growth of seagrass under elevated carbon dioxide condition. Seagrass provide valuable habitat, but if the plant overgrow is conduce to reduction of ecosystem biodiversity. The phenomenon we have here, we have the sun here, and we have the atmosphere, how is going. We have the trend, and we have the PCO2 and the pH, then we have here. And to obtain essential mainstream of nutrients, for example, you see, ocean acidification could make it harder for marine organisms to absorb nitrogen, phosphorus, iron, and other element for growing. For example, element for growing, and for essence when seawater becomes acid, iron attack the organism compound, prevented marine life for using this essential element. You see, acidic composition. What we have here, they are growing, photosynthesis is going. You have excess nutrient and low oxygen and coastal acidification. You see what happen here according to the where is decreased with the depth. Ocean acidification could make it harder for marine organisms to absorb nitrogen, phosphorus, iron, and other elements essential for growth. When seawater becomes more acid and to attack organisms for using essential element iron. And you see here, marine life susceptible to ocean acidification impacted habitat loss. We lost habitat, reduction of shell formation, and less available prey for the other species. Acidification. Our ocean absorb excessive CO2 when human is going with it decreases. This is a phenomenon we have ecosystem here. What can we do? What can help to reduce what this effect. We have mitigation now. Mitigation, we have afforestation and reforestation. The additional plan to capture from the sea. The phenomenon we have here, and combating acidification require to reduce reducing carbon dioxide emission in improving the health of the ocean, creating marine protected area, and stopping destructive fishing practice. Addition of alkali to the ocean, addition of the limestone carbonate material plantation of trees, green bed around the industry, for example, to absorb the marine protected area, how the ecosystem is going. Is the best practice. Yes. No, I'm going to a conclusion. I finish now.
Thank you so much.
Acidification, I'm finished now. Due to acidification, the ocean ability to store carbon decreases significantly due to saturation. We must therefore increase action to reduce the CO2 emission if all countries, especially the most industrial countries, do not increase the effort to reduce emission. All of humanity will struggle with resilience. The negative impact is increasingly being felt on the marine ecosystem, local community, and throughout a global economy, a main blue economy. In this situation, the blue economy will only be a convent. It will be a sham for all humanity. Education on the protection of the ocean is absolutely necessary for better future for humanity. Thank you.
Yep.
I apologize for.
Thank you very much, Zachary. I mean, we're running much short time. We're already nearing our session end, but we still have Anthony to talk, and we'll probably keep like 5-10 minutes. I won't go within beyond another 10 minutes extra. So we'll try again with Anthony if he happens to be online with us and can give a talk.
Yeah, I'm here.
Up to you.
Thanks. Can you share my screen, please?
Yes, go on. I think, Sarah, if possible.
Okay, while that is going on, thank you very much, and apologies for the earlier technical issues. The earlier presenters have basically been talking on the scientific aspect, including the monitoring and the rest. I'll be coming from a different dimension. I'll be looking at it from the policy perspective. I am currently participating in the GOA-ON peer-to-peer program, mentorship program under the mentorship of Dr. Mark Spalding, the president of the Ocean Foundation. And, looking at it from the policy dimension, how do we begin to mainstream policy into mainstream ocean acidification into national policies and in Nigeria and West Africa. Next slide, please. So basically, what I'm presenting is a proposal under which we've submitted under the scholarship program of the peer-to-peer program, so of our project that we intend implementing. So the main goal of this project is to facilitate advocacy on mainstreaming ocean acidification into national policies in Nigeria and West Africa. Next slide, please. So specifically, the objectives are to, one, advocate for the mainstreaming of ocean acidification into national policies in Nigeria and West Africa, raise stakeholders' awareness on ocean acidification in Nigeria and West Africa by engaging policymakers, scientists, early career ocean professionals, local community, villages, and the public on the growing threat posed by ocean acidification, as well as local actions that may be taken to address ocean acidification. Another objective is for us to facilitate a national campaign and roadmap towards mainstreaming ocean acidification into national policies in Nigeria and West Africa advocating for the implementation of the following action that will prevent or slow ocean acidification through reducing atmospheric emission of carbon dioxide, reducing input of land-based pollutants, and other measures. Next slide, please. We're also looking at advocating for the implementation of action to assist ocean-dependent communities, industries, and marine ecosystems to adapt to increasing acidity in marine waters. We're also looking to work towards advocating for sustained funding nationally and regionally for ongoing, enhanced, and coordinated research and ocean acidification observation system to continue to inform government and others about the increasing impact of ocean acidification. And then lastly, the objective is to advocate also to mainstream gender, because we see that we have very little gender participation in this. Next slide, please. So in trying to achieve the above highlighted objective, we have highlighted the following activities that will help realize the earlier stated objective. One, virtual monitoring, mentoring on current global ocean acidification policy issues. Two, we are looking at carrying out advocacy and awareness capacity building workshops, so webinars for various stakeholders on ocean acidification in Nigeria and West Africa. Among those issues that we are highlighted earlier career professional policymakers, among others. We're also looking at carrying out for further awareness and enlightenment of the general stakeholder and ocean acidification traveling exhibition in campuses and various stakeholders group. And we're also looking at road shows, including radios, TV stations, talk shows, to also further elevate the discussion around ocean acidification. And also, we also think it will be important to conduct a policy review for mainstreaming ocean acidification in national policy and legislative framework in Nigeria and West Africa. And finally, we also think it is important because there's a great need for a lot of advocacy and awareness activities, and how do you communicate science communication? So we think there's a need for civil society action network that will specifically targeting advocacy around ocean acidification network. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, we believe that the ocean acidification cities action network that will be established in Nigeria and West Africa will also advocate that by incorporating ocean acidification monitoring and research recommendation across relevant policy and management frameworks, government, science, and community partners have an enhanced ability to, one, take inventory of regional local knowledge and observation of climate ocean change, develop a more comprehensive approaches to climate risk preparedness, mitigation, and adaptation. Next slide, please. Better integrate activities across climate, ocean, and coastal policy and management, and also strengthen the connection between science, community priorities, and effective ocean and coastal management in one region. Prioritize information to determine adaptive capacities of critical species and increase ecosystem service resilience. It will also add value to strengthening public and private funding for climate ocean mitigation, adaptation, and resilient projects, and also support implementation of existing climate, ocean, and coastal commitment across the UN SDG agenda, NFCC, CBD, blue economy, and other applicable framework. Next slide, please. So finally, we believe that mainstreaming ocean acidification into national policies in Nigeria and in West Africa presents a practical way of coping with changes and uncertainties in climate, including variabilities and extremes, reducing vulnerability and promoting sustainable development, particularly in coastal communities. class like this. Thank you very much. And once again, I apologize for the technical issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anthony, for your very brilliant presentation, especially in the field of policy. I mean, both Anthony and Zachary probably involved with Abidjan Convention, because in East Africa, we're talking about the Nairobi Convention, where policies and laws and everything, white papers about the ocean acidification has to be developed, especially in North Africa as well with the Barcelona Convention. So as we are running short of time, probably we'll have one question, a couple of questions to Carla, but I will see whether we can ask a question, because I will have to move to our moderator, to our coordinator, to make the final remark. So a question to you, Carla, from Zachary. He asked you about, do you think that sargassum as a microalgae is a nursery for the fishes? Can you just answer that?
Hi, thanks for the question. Sargassum, sorry, I'm not actually a plant expert, but is sargassum not a salt marsh species, or it's a seagrass, macroalgal species? Yeah, I imagine that if it's established as a reef, or if it's a part of a macroalgal reef, that it will serve as a nursery. That review paper that I presented will probably have details on that. I collaborate with botanists. I'm not a botanist.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Just one question, just if you can answer that. Do you have advice for future GOA-ON in a box kit users or other early career researchers in oil? Briefly.
Okay, it's quite a general question in terms of advice. So as far as I'm aware, I was one of the early recipients of the GOA-ON OA in a box kit. There was quite a bit of troubleshooting that we had to do to get it to function. My only advice is not to give up, especially when it comes to technical difficulties. There are a lot of challenges, but if you persist and you make it work, then it's definitely worth your while. So we had a lot of issues that we had to resolve, and through collaboration with various people, we eventually solved these, and we got really good data. So in that sense, according to the GOA-ON box, I recommend you persist and solve your problems, and eventually it will pay off. And I think the same goes for early career research. You know, it's challenging to enter a new field, especially from a country where this type of research is still establishing, and you don't necessarily have a lot of support in terms of funding and resources, but that's where collaboration and networking really plays an important role. So meeting people at workshops and conferences, talking with different groups and researchers, eventually you can make it happen and get yourself where you want to be. So that would be my general advice.
Yeah, thank you very much, Carla. I think we'll wrap up with the questions, because I now have to move to Shima for the final remarks. Thank you very much for all of you, and I'll ask Shima to conclude this session. Thank you very much.
We would like to thank you, the organizers, the moderator, and the speakers for a great session. And we thank you, the audience, for joining for OA Week 2023. Please don't forget to consult a website and register for any other sessions that may interest you. If you would like to stay up to date with the GOA-ON community, consider signing up to GOA-ON member on www.goaon.org. To discover more about ocean acidification research for sustainability, please scan the QR code. Thank you all for attending, and see you next time.